This podcast is made possible by High Radius.
Hello, this is Nathan Winters, CFO of Zebra Technologies, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 807.
We use data to understand where inventory is, how fast it's moving, what brands we have. I'll tell you, our team has gotten to the point where if I called our sales and marketing team, they could tell me how many XYZ models of Whaler we have in a certain district in a certain state. I mean, we can get down to the product SKU level, which for us helps with explaining inventory movements and the potential for continued growth throughout all of our organizations.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Ryan Gwillim, CFO of Brunswick Corporation. A dozen years ago, if you had told Ryan Gwillim that within the next decade he'd be named CFO of the Brunswick Corporation, he may have laughed or told you were crazy. At that time, Gwillum was an associate with law firm Baker McKenzie, who was spending his days traveling the globe to advise legal clients as an M&A transaction guru. However, over the next decade, Gwillum and Brunswick would together find a common groove, as each embarked on a journey of transformation. For Brunswick, a 155-year-old conglomerate, the evolutionary arc would trigger a flurry of historic M&A activity that included the sale of its marquee bowling center business, while at the same time advancing its steady stroke into marine products. For Gwillum, the transformation chapter would put an end to his vagabond existence, while landing the seasoned M&A attorney inside Brunswick Corporate Counsel's office, the first of a number of roles that led to the CFO office. Our talk with Ryan Gwillim begins after this. Did you know more than 60% of B2B invoices are paid late? Well, then it should come as little surprise that the priorities of finance leaders have shifted towards accelerating cash recovery and scaling business growth. To address this issue, High Radius now connects your credit, billing and invoicing, cash application deductions, and collections into a single business process and empowers your finance team to champion your business's high-performance culture. More than 700 of the world's leading companies have transformed the office of their CFO with High Radius. Unlock working capital and reduce bad debt with the best AI-powered accounts receivable management software. To learn more, visit us at highradius.com. Hello, we're speaking with Ryan Gwillim, CFO of the Brunswick Corporation. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks for having me today.
So, Ryan, we've been looking forward to this. This is an interesting company. Many who enjoy boating or the marine life probably know Brunswick. It's not a small company today. It's north of $5 billion, and I just want to give the audience some sense of how large this company is. You can clarify better for us a little later, perhaps. And if you're in the marine world, you've seen the name, you've seen Mercury boat engines, or maybe had a ride in a Boston whaler. But that's part of the Brunswick world. That's my nice overview.
No, it's good. It's good. You've been studying.
I just took a quick look at the site, and I was surprised how many of the brands I was familiar with. So what we do is, as we kick off, we ask our guests to look back for us and try to identify some of those experiences they feel prepared them for this role, the finance leadership role. What would come to mind for you?
Well, Jack, let me take you back more than 20 years ago now. I'm going to start way away from the finance world. I'm going to start at a college bar. I was fortunate enough to start working at a bar when I was a freshman in college. as a bouncer, which is pretty funny looking back at that today. And I worked my way up into the management team, and then eventually the general manager of a college bar. And it sounds, maybe when you hear it, you're kind of like, well, that seems somewhat interesting, but how is this related? But I had about 225 college kids on my staff. And I will tell you, my first real insight and foresight into being a leader was being kind of a same age as most of my peers, and learning how to navigate through 200 plus other college kids in a setting that, as you can imagine, Jack, is a bit volatile, right? It's college bar. You got kids coming in, having a really nice time, having fun. People, people having too much fun. But my first real understanding of, you got to look through all of the people that are on your team. You got to figure out who does what well, putting them in the right spot, putting them in places that are going to succeed and have fun. As you can imagine, the turnover in a place like this was immense. I mean, we had people that would work 1 week and then leave the following week and go to the bar next door, literally. That was being run by one of my friends. So, it was trying to run an operation, but also, keep your team together. So that was, I'll tell you, I learned a lot. I'm sure I made a ton of mistakes too, but at 21, getting an opportunity to do that role and to learn just some of the basics and how to treat people well and what people respond to, that really was for me my first real leadership experience.
What occurs to me was that you were someone who was willing to take on responsibility in an environment or a time, actually, where many young people are not necessarily raising their hand, and it can be a tough job just because you have to manage people whose heads aren't always in the game, let's say.
Yeah, that's right. And it often, in times, and not often, but sometimes resulted in me having to make pretty difficult decisions that weren't overly popular, right? With certain groups, and partly was to keep my employees safe, partly was to keep my employees away from law enforcement or something they shouldn't be doing legally. But that's probably the other aspect, is having to make some difficult decisions, but decisions that you knew were best for your employees. So then I stayed at the school that I went to undergrad at the University of Illinois. I was there just shy of a decade. And so I went to law school, stayed there, and I also taught accounting along the way, which is a really good experience. But I'm going to keep going through that to my first real job, obviously, in the legal field. I was an associate in the corporate securities group at Baker McKenzie in Chicago. It's a fantastic global law firm. For full disclosure, I still deal and work with many of those colleagues still today in my current role. But I joined at an interesting time. I joined in the fall of 2005, and as everyone may remember, it's a pretty good time. The market was up, and people were kind of cruising through. I was doing primarily cross-border M&A transactions for large kind of Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies, and really learning how the deal process worked, and how big companies formed relationships with others, and then did some kind of a merger transaction, buy-sell transaction along the way. And so it was great experience. So I was in full learning mode. Well, then we all know what happened in 07, 08. The market the market crashes. It's the GFC, as we now know today. And I kind of looked around in kind of 2008, 2009, and of my class that started with me, there was kind of me and one other person left. Some voluntarily, some not. But what it did for me is it opened the door to do all kinds of different work. Why? Because I was one of the only kind of mid-level associates that was at the corporate group in Chicago. And so I did, I got the opportunity to do, more public company work. I kept my M&A focus. I did a lot of restructurings. I did a bankruptcy deal. And all of this for me in terms of leadership is I was really broadening my kind of view of business and transactions. And, it was a tough time because the work was challenging, the work was hard, the work was long. But as I look back today, having kind of 6-7 years to do all of these different transactions and work with different people and learn from different partners that I was working with became unbelievably valuable. But it has a bit of a but at the end, which is in kind of the fall of 11. It'd be the fall of 10. I had a bit of a Jerry Mcguire moment, Jack. I got back from a trip in India. I was representing a U.S. company in India in an Indian transaction. And again, the work was great. The client was wonderful, but I had been away from my family for kind of 6-8 weeks, and I was burned out. And instead of going to one of my partners and friends and saying, "Hey, I need to step away. I'm burned out," I left. I had another job with a legal outsourcing company, which sounded good at the time. It ended up not being for me. But lesson learned there is, you got to trust some of the leaders that you look up to and that you learn from. Because all I would have done, if I would have walked into Mike DeFranco's office or Phil Stamatakis or any of the people, Helen Mantel, Olivia Tyrrell, all of these people that I look up to at Baker, if I would have said to any of them, I need to step away for a little bit, they would have all said, "I completely get it. Go take time, come on back, and we'll keep going." I chose another path, and that leads me to kind of where I am today. And when I was at Baker, I did a significant amount of work for Brunswick. At the time, as you can imagine, going through the GFC, Brunswick was a completely different company. It was a conglomerate of various different recreational assets, which it isn't today. Today, it's marine focused, a much smarter portfolio design. But I got to know a lot of the legal team. I got to know some of the finance folks at Brunswick, and I did probably 8 to 10 projects with Brunswick over my time at Baker. So as I was in about month 3 or 4 of this legal outsourcing gig, which again was not for me, I just happened to go visit my colleague Kristen Coleman, who was the general counsel at Brunswick at the time, and she was a fantastic mentor for me. And it ended up working out that they had a kind of a low-level position open, and I think we all, Chris and I both said it's probably below where I would expect to kind of jump into a company. But to be honest, I was ready to bet on myself. I knew I liked the company. I knew a bunch of folks already there, and so I jumped in and I joined Brunswick in May of 2011, and worked in 4 or 5 different legal roles before kind of my big turning point in September of 2017 with IR.
And again, you mentioned earlier at Baker, it was about cross-border M&A deals often that you would be involved with. The nature of that work, and we all can make some assumptions, but I'm wondering if you can clarify for us. Often what you would visit the company or a company that's being acquired that had offices abroad, perhaps, and or maybe it was headquartered abroad. I don't know. And again, you would have to look at all the legal issues that could suddenly come upon the acquiring company if they were to take over this offshore entity. I mean, just very simple. But what is it exactly that you're participating in? The due diligence? What is it exactly?
Yeah, you're exactly right. You actually hit it really well. Either the target, the buyer, or the seller, any of the above could be outside the United States, and oftentimes it was all three. Baker's known for their global presence, and just about every deal I worked on for 5 years had one of the parties outside of the United States or a significant amount of the assets that were being bought or sold outside the United States. So we would do diligence on the ground. We would go negotiate the purchase agreements and all of the ancillary agreements to go along with this transaction. We would go just meetings with our client, with the target or the seller. And so, travel was a huge part of the job, Jack. And I'll be honest, I love it. I loved to travel then. I still love to travel with my family today. It's a big part of who we are and what we do. But when you're doing it for work and you do it for year over year over year, it does get taxing. And certainly it caught up to me there in 2011.
And just curious, when there was a time that a deal upon your due diligence or upon discussions with the company being acquired, the deal didn't go forward. What most often is the reason?
Generally, it's a incongruency of value, right? So it's one side believes that the value of the transaction is X, and the other believes it's X minus a big factor or X plus a big factor. Most times it comes down to what a purchaser obviously is willing to pay for an asset, but the view of what that asset is worth can take many forms. And when you're talking a synergy value, or you're talking, it's never 1 + 1 = 2, right? It's always, the goal is always 1 + 1 = 2.5, 3, 3.5 or more. And when you don't have that value line up, then oftentimes people have to walk away. And it's funny, I've been on many deals, Jack, both when I was working at Baker and now at Brunswick, where you didn't have valuation certainty between the parties at one point, and then maybe a few months later, the market changes or facts change, and those two parties, the value becomes a lot closer together, and you can actually get a deal done.
Interesting. So things can change over a period of months sometimes. And again, at this place in time, you stepped into the investor relations role, which in fact is really an interesting segue for you. I know it's an important one. But at this place in time, as you're really the legal mind at the table, you might have a finance person accompanying you as they do the valuations, and so you're observing their world. It's not your world yet, but you're observing it. How would you characterize your relationship with finance in general at that stage?
Well, yes. Before I was the investor relations head, I would work in concert with the M&A team and the finance team on transactions and commercial agreements within Brunswick. I knew enough to be dangerous, but I'll be the first to tell you that my kind of rote finance skills, and I am an accountant, I'm a CPA, but that was 2002 when I took the CPA exam. And I'm sitting here in 2015, 2016, my rote finance accounting skills kind of took a back seat to my kind of more general corporate securities legal practice, which is what I spent most of my time with, even doing M&A and commercial work and securities for Brunswick in the legal department. But when I stepped, September of 17, when Bill came by my office and asked if I was interested in investor relations, and I said yes, that sounds great, but I'm not really sure I know what it does. I mean, I know what it did. Obviously, I related to the IR team when I was doing some of the legal work, and they were reporting out to investors and preparing for earnings calls, et cetera. So I knew enough kind of on the process, but I didn't know exactly kind of what the day-to-day was. But man, did I learn quickly, Jack. I dusted off those finance chops, and I have no shame to tell people that I have a Kiso and Wigan accounting book from my own time at Illinois that I was flipping through and reminding myself of accounting treatments and how some of the finance metrics work and what investors look at. Because I'll tell you, you want to talk about taking on IR at a volatile time. September of 17 and for the next kind of 2 years was certainly one of the most volatile times, I think, in Brunswick's history. And here I was very quickly with the management team, but the face of the storytelling with the investment community.
Well, why was it? Help us understand what was that chapter about for Brunswick.
So we were at that point really closing the book on kind of our conglomerate viewpoint to the world, our conglomerate kind of presentation of how we did our business units. At the time, we had a very distinct engine business, which is Mercury, which is fantastic. And we'll get to what makes Brunswick later. But we had a boat business. We had a small but growing parts and accessories business. We had just gotten rid of the bowling business, which people still remember Brunswick as bowling, but today we are completely separate. And then we also had a fitness business. We owned Life Fitness, which is the fitness manufacturing company. It's not, people often confuse it with Lifetime Fitness, which are those big clubs, but we owned Life Fitness, which was the manufacturer of cardio and strength products, it's one of the global leaders. But at the time, that business was starting to really struggle, and investors, correctly, to be very fair, were starting to ask why it was part of the portfolio. What did it have to do with all the rest of the marine assets? It was funny, when it was doing well, kind of in the early part of the 2010s, no one questioned it. But as soon as it started to have a little bit of trouble, people came out of the woodwork and told us to make some decisions that would involve, getting fitness out of the portfolio. Little did they know that was already well in hand. The management and the board had, we had figured that this was going to be a thing that we would want to do to maximize shareholder value eventually. And so we were relatively down the track. But it was, we had several M&A deals going, some that didn't get across the line. We actually sold our largest boat business, when I mean largest, our biggest boat product business, the yacht business. And, a lot of these moves involve significant investor interaction. And so 2 years went by like it was a month, Jack, from 19 to kind of the summer of 21, and from 17 to 19. And I learned a lot about what the investor community wants in a public company, and then how to relate to an investor base that's not always going to be supportive of what you
mentioned Bill, Bill earlier. Was that the CFO back in time who brought you into the investor relations?
He was, yeah, he was the CFO prior to me, and when he retired in 2020, that is when I became the CFO.
That's a nice overview for us. We might have a few more career-related questions for you later, but right now let's talk about Brunswick and this. And I think you've already kind of pointed the way. It seems to be a new chapter that's opening here as you got rid of certain businesses and perhaps has sharpened the focus in one way or another. I don't know, but what would you tell us about Brunswick, this company today?
Yeah, we are a completely different organization than we were 10, 15 years ago. We are now a much more narrowly focused marine recreational technology company that really owns everything around the water, including the boat, the engine, parts and accessories, a boat club, Freedom Boat Club, which is a fantastic part of our offering. But we really succeed on focusing on technology and capital spending, R&D spending on things that not only do people want, but will also obviously drive a profit for the company and for the shareholders. And we are the market leader at Mercury Marine and Outboard Engines. We are a market leader in several of our boat categories. We believe we have the biggest parts and accessories business in the world, and we have the biggest boat club. And so you mentioned earlier, we're actually, our public guidance this year is to get about $7 billion in revenue. So we are, this is last year was the best year in company history, and we believe this year will top that. But it is certainly on the back of making very strong decisions on the portfolio, very good execution with all of our business lines. And Dave has put together a management team that we're all moving in the same direction. I try to avoid we're all rowing in the same direction because that's too easy of a boat pun. But we are all moving in the same direction and understand what it takes to win in this environment, or to succeed in the environment.
Wow. So that's an impressive year, the following 12 months, previous 12 months. Is there something in the environment as well? I mean, is it after COVID, people are looking to enjoy themselves more? Is it marine life actually does allow you to go out with your family members? I don't know. Anything that might have triggered such growth from the current business environment?
Yeah, a lot of it is people who boat. It's a lifestyle to them, Jack. It's not, it's funny. Our kind of first time boaters did increase during COVID because it was an opportunity for them to spend more time on the water at a time when they couldn't travel or weren't vacationing as much. But a large majority of these folks are people that have boating in their DNA. They like to fish. They like to be on the water with their family. They have a lake house. Not many people just run off the street and say, I'm going to go buy a boat today. Now, we'll take those people, of course. We're very happy to service them. But boating is really in people's DNA. And what we have seen is, yes, we certainly kind of right at the early onset in COVID, we did sell a significant amount of boats. And we're still today working to refill the inventory that's in the field, much like you see the car dealerships that don't have any cars. Most boat dealerships don't have many boats today. But what COVID really did was it allowed people to be a little bit more free to be on the water at times that maybe were a bit taboo previously. The whole work from home or more flexible work life is certainly an advantage for recreational activities, whether it's boating or golfing or camping, whatever you like to do. Not going to your office every day from 7:30 to 6 or whatever your hours are, and having the ability to be a little bit more flexible has allowed for more people to be on the water. More people on the water means more parts and accessories they need. And it's more opportunity for them to upgrade their product. And we've certainly seen the benefit of that. We think that's a very strong tailwind for us really over the next many years, as despite the world opening up, which it is, people are still on the water more today than they've ever been. And we don't see a whole lot of that changing here in the near term.
You mentioned how the different product lines or lines of business have all experienced pretty much strong growth, and I'm wondering about your lines of sight into those businesses. Along the way, have you gotten the visibility that into the pipeline and into the funnel, the sales funnel? I mean, have you been able to increase your lines of sight and predict demand in these different lines?
Yeah, we really have, Jack. I mean, we are primarily B2B, right? So we sell our boats to dealers. We sell our engines to other boat OEMs or to dealers or to distributors. So we do mostly our sales to our business partners. And, the inventory in the field all over the world is extremely low. So we know that we can run our facilities today pretty hard over the next really years. And even with kind of a basic retail assumption that we think the retail is going to be flat or flat to slightly up, slightly down, wherever you want to put it, as long as it's not on either end of the spectrum too far, it's going to take quite a bit for us to put more inventory in the field. So yes, we have probably more visibility today than we've ever had. Obviously, the end use customer, our core retail customer, the people that are buying our product from our channels, that we believe that they're still quite healthy today. But we're all watching Wall Street. We're all watching what's going on the news. And there's obviously more uncertainty today than maybe there was 12 months ago. But at the end of the day, our core customer remains relatively healthy, and we think will be supportive of a pretty good retail environment.
Just as far as how you look at the business, is there a particular, and I don't know if are you a data driven CFO? Do you have a data strategy as yet, or how do you characterize the digital world when it intersects your Brunswick world?
No, we definitely do, and we have our hands on a lot more data today than we ever have, and part of that is how close to the consumer can we get? Again, selling to dealers and or selling to other boat manufacturers. Again, 85% of our engines that we manufacture at Mercury, they go to other boat OEMs. So only a small part actually goes to our own brands. But we use data to understand where inventory is, how fast it's moving, what brands we have. I'll tell you, our team has gotten to the point where if I called our sales and marketing team they could tell me how many XYZ models of whaler we have in a certain district in a certain state. I mean, we can get down to the product SKU level, which for us helps with explaining inventory movements and the potential for continued growth throughout all of our organizations. So yeah, I'm pretty heavy on the numbers. Part of it though is also, we use Freedom Boat Club to get to the end consumer and talk to them about what they like with the product. What do they like with the boat or the engine? This is a model where consumers don't own the boat, but they belong to a club that has 10, 20, 40 boats, and they just get a reservation. They go and they can use the boat at their club or at a reciprocal location throughout the season. And it's a great model. It's a lighter touch for people that don't have the ability to own a product or simply don't want to. But what that does, and it gives us 48,000, almost 50,000 people that belong to Freedom that we can talk to about what they like, dislike, or want different on a boat product. And so data is important, but also listening, literally listening to the customer on what moves them to be on the product more has been very important.
For those of us who might not be familiar with the Freedom Boat Club, is that something that's come along in the last 2 decades, or has it been around for a long time? Or
it's been around for a couple decades. It started in the late 90s in Southwest Florida, and it grew to about 170 locations around the U.S. When we purchased it in 2019, we have now doubled it in size, and we think that it can probably double again over the course of the next decade or so. But I'll tell you, probably in my time, it's one of the best investments we've made in an M&A transaction, and that the team that's running is doing a fantastic job. And certainly anybody listening, if they see an opportunity to join Freedom and they're interested in being on the water, you should contact your local area, your local club, because it's I'm a Freedom member as well. Jag, and it really it works well with our family. So I couldn't say better things about it.
Interesting. That's what an interesting type of acquisition that must have been then. And that happened in 2019?
It did, yes.
And acquisitions are still on the menu. I imagine it's something that Brunswick has been successful at doing in the past. And over the next 12 months, we should expect to see perhaps a few others, or no?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We have been quite active. I mean, you can really, really sense the downturn as we decided to grow the parts of the portfolio that generated repeatable earnings and revenue, which is really the parts and accessories business, a business like Freedom Boat Club, our propulsion business at Mercury. We have really invested in those parts of the business, and M&A has been a big part of it. We are the type of company. It's funny. We're certainly big enough to have big company problems, right? At a $7 billion kind of enterprise value, maybe a little bit more. But we're also kind of small enough that we need to take care in digesting some of these bigger deals. Some of the smaller deals that we can bolt on pretty easily, like if we've purchased some of the Freedom locations. So Freedom is primarily a franchise operation, and then us as Brunswick, or the owner, we own about 20-25% of the locations. There have been places where we've picked off and purchased some locations in big areas where we want to really increase the investment quickly. And we can do those kind of deals relatively easily. I mean, it takes work from the team. And it's easy for me to say that when I'm not actually boots on the ground doing the deals, but from a 50,000 foot level, we can do those deals relatively seamlessly. But some of the bigger deals, like the Power Products transaction in 2018 or the Navico transaction last year, I mean, if we want to do it right, it takes a team effort to not only get the deal done and completed, but to integrate it correctly so that we maximize the synergies and maximize the value for what we purchased. So we will be continuing to be acquisitive. But given the Navico deal last year, I wouldn't expect something of that size. That was a $1 billion deal, which is really turning out well for us, just as Power Products did 3 years earlier. But we will be busy.
When you think about your FP&A team, I have to believe those professionals that would be characterized as FP&A, they're participating in these acquisitions. They're the ones on the front lines trying to make certain that it would be a good fit, or here's the valuation that makes sense, or no. Where is your FP&A talent today?
Yeah, FP&A is involved. I would say my core M&A team is really the boots on the ground, along with the business unit that's involved. Whatever business units kind of would be the home for the transaction. My M&A team, led by my Maritza Gibbons, who's been doing M&A for 2 decades, they are doing the valuations. They are working with the business unit to uncover the synergies. They are working with counsel to do the due diligence. So, FP&A's got their hands full with the organic side of the business. And to be fair, there's a lot of crossover between FP&A and kind of the analyst level in the M&A spot, right? You end up doing a lot of the same types of activities. But I do have them separate under under 2 real senior leaders, the corporate FP&A being under my corporate controller, and then the M&A being under the M&A side.
Well, if I like to ask this question, yeah, your FP&A, the organic side of the house, they're seated at a conference table down the hall. You swing open the door, and what are they going to? Oh no, Ryan's going to be asking us for this. What is it that they think Ryan's going to be asking them about?
What the next forecast looks like, probably, is what they say. But it's funny you mentioned that, and I was looking at one of the other kind of prep items you had us think about is, what if you had a strategic moment, or if you had something that really.
Let's ask you that. Can I ask you that question?
Yeah. Can I? I'll just.
I don't want to lose the opportunity to have it be a standalone. So yes, share a finance strategic moment with us, if you would.
That's right. And it comes really what you just said. It was, when I was in the IR role, I mean, I was day to day with the FP&A team, right? Because what I talked about was the results and what the guidance looked like ahead of time. And the FP&A team was putting together guidance and all of the materials that we needed to constructively engage with the investment community. And over time, we used to put together a binder, Jack, that was like 3 inches thick each quarter of analysis and reports and things. And after about 2 years of doing the IR role, I figured out that I used about 20% of that. And I kind of thought to myself, what would happen if we stopped doing the 3-inch thick binder every quarter and unlocked some of these people to do some other more value add things? And that really stuck to me. It was kind of weekend in, weekend out, trying to get ready for earnings. And I was looking for schedules, and I'd get a schedule and I wouldn't even look at it, or I'd look at it for a second and move on. And that really drove one of my main premises as a CFO is to focus the work on what is adding value, what is necessary for us to prepare ourselves for investor questions, have the information necessary to run the business, to help our business units operate more efficiently. And today, that 3-inch binder is probably less than 1 inch. And the FP&A team, the accounting team, those people have hours upon hours more to do more value add activity. And it makes it a much better experience. I'll tell you, FP&A in a public company is a slog. Anybody that says it's not is lying. It's a slog. And getting to take off some of the, what I call blocking and tackling, if it wasn't adding value, if people weren't using the results, being able to move people away from that and onto more value added projects was really important to me. And that hasn't stopped, Jack. I still challenge the team every quarter to take a look at what they're preparing and come to me if they think that there's reports that aren't necessary, that people aren't looking at, especially if they take more time than necessary to prepare. Right? It's always a value proposition. A document, a report, could be really helpful and take 30 seconds. it could be marginally helpful and take 8 hours or something to put together. Well, what do you think I'm going to tell you to drop off your list?
Just as far as forecasting is concerned, has the company has it moved to rolling forecasts, or what have been some of the milestones for your forecasting team?
Yeah, no, we do a rolling forecast and we refresh it every month with the input from the divisions. And we focus on the items that really move the ball. We focus on obviously sales, and it's really sales, gross margin, standard product margin, op expense, and then anything else that is kind of big ticket, whether it's a capital strategy item or not. But we don't. The idea of trying to re-rack a forecast from start every month doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And you could argue that trying to even roll it every month doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And there may be a day where we even step away from that a little bit. But I think the process has improved, but it certainly gives myself and Dave, our CEO, and the rest of the team the information we need to converse with the investors, to converse with our board, which is obviously very important. So it's still a bit of a laborious process, but I think we've taken enough steps out or adjusted them so that it's a little bit more static each month. We use kind of the same. We try to use the same presentation shells for our internal and external meetings, so we're not kind of recreating slides every time. All these little things do start to add up and result in much more efficiency in the team.
I want to touch on talent with you as well. Curious about whether COVID and the remote environment, how that impacted your workforce, whether your mindset when it comes to talent, has it been altered in some way as we see it become a much more competitive marketplace for hiring? What would you share with us?
I would tell you that I have spent more time in my 2 years as CFO on talent and HR issues as I've done anything, to be honest. I think it is so critical to the success of the company. And I have spent a lot of time on it, partly because it was demanded by the COVID environment, which, as you mentioned, it has changed the game. We are in a kind of a hybrid work environment where primarily we ask people to come in a day or two a week into the office. And I do think that that's valuable. I think that's important to get to grow relationships with your teammates and with people in the other kind of functions or divisions. But I'm also, I don't frankly care where you are doing your work. We're all professionals. We succeeded really well that first, 18 months or 20 months where we were basically fully remote. Our office was open and people were able to go in if they wanted to, but a large majority of our talent was working remotely. And that has just only recently changed to where we've gone to this hybrid environment. But we have to be more flexible when we look for talent. I mean, the talent in the marketplace right now is expecting more flexibility, and I think we need to be able to deliver it. Whether it means, I've got people on my team that live in time zones away, and they're still quite successful. They maybe they start earlier or they start later, depending on when their team is up and prime business hours. I promote flexibility throughout the day. It's one thing to say, go ahead and, you only need to come in the office Tuesday and Thursday. But if managers are mandating that their teams are at their desk every day at home, strictly from 8 to 5, that's not a whole lot of flexibility. And so, our real core tenet, at least in the finance department, is get your work done. I don't care where you do it, but get your job done, get your work done, but take some flexibility. If you want to go and go to your kid's dance competition at 3:00, you should. No one should be judging you from where you are, what you're doing. And I know it's a bit of a progressive message, and I've really been beating the drum, Jack, since I took over the CFO role, because it was a change of pace. We previously were more of a bottom in seats type of organization across the organization. So it's taken a little time to mold us to a more flexible place, but I think we're getting there.
The numbers that you might look at yourself, though, is it net new hires and is it, employee churn? Are these numbers visible to you, or have you had to go digging and making certain you can track them more closely? Or how are your lines of sight into that workforce? What are you looking at, really?
Yeah, no, the HR team. So we use obviously we use the Workday system, which we like a lot as an organization, but it enables us to track really on a weekly basis the folks coming in and coming out of the organization. I'll be honest, we've been relatively lucky, Jack. Our turnover kind of in the global finance organization has been relatively mellow. It's relatively moderate, which I think goes a long way. I think people like working at Brunswick. It's a fun, we make great products. It's kind of a fun culture. I believe we have a great leadership team, and I think there's a lot of confidence in where we're going. And so we have not lost a whole lot of people. We have lost a couple, and some regrettable. And it always depends on the circumstance. We lost a young lady in Treasury who was fantastic, but she wanted to go and test kind of the New York investment banking world. And who am I to say no to that? That's the right time in her life to go try that. We wished her well, and we said, hey, if you ever want to come back to the Chicago area, the door is open for you. And so it's funny, we have had a number of people that have left us of the small number that has left us, quite a few have come back into the fold over time if they didn't like where they ended up or wanted to come back to an environment they knew was conducive to success for their career. And so all of those things are helpful. But yeah, we've got the details down pretty kind of on a granular basis, certainly on the, kind of in the finance world, in the finance realm. I watch the numbers pretty carefully.
Just we're going to jump to our mentoring round, but I just wanted to just have a question just regarding your career once again. It seems to me, again, the M&A part of your professional life, it seems to be the common thread that runs all through it. That's one thought I have. The other is that when did you maybe step into you probably had boardroom access from a fairly early stage just because you were involved in M&A, and if the board ever had questions about a particular deal, perhaps the CFO offered to have you explain something or other. I don't know, but that's often how it happens. How am I doing? Am I close to your world?
You are. Yeah, you really are, Jack. And it also helped that I did the kind of corporate securities role and corporate governance role when I was in the legal side, because you get pretty good, interaction with the audit committee because you're kind of helping create the audit package and the securities package. I was, it's funny. I like to laugh. Our chairwoman, Nancy Cooper, who's fantastic. I onboarded her. I got her all set up with her diligent online access, and she and I still have a great relationship to this day. Part of it is because I knew her from day one when she joined our board back in 2013, 2014. So I was lucky enough. My boss then, who is the general counsel now, Chris Decker, who's a very good friend of mine and somebody that certainly has been a mentor to me over the years. He thought, and rightly, that getting people in front of the board would be advantageous to careers, to just getting us more visibility into what they are thinking and how how boards work. So I'm lucky that throughout my career, kind of the leadership has thought that it's important to get in front of the board and in front of the executive team. And I have tried to emulate that in my career and get people that are up and coming in their career in front of the board, in front of me, in front of Dave and the management team early in their career.
And likewise, when the CFO, Bill, you described earlier, how he came and he said, asked you to step into the investor relations role, he was getting someone who is pretty experienced and was known to board members even, and it was understood he can communicate rather well. So when it was time to step up and talk to the analyst community, it wasn't a huge leap for you, really.
No, it wasn't. I mean, the biggest leap was really getting the finance chops sharpened up, which I did pretty quickly. But no, the public speaking and all of the communication roles, I think most people knew was one of my strengths, and so I think there was confidence there. And Bill was a good mentor of mine as well. I mean, he definitely saw. I started working with him back in the Baker days. He was, when he was the treasurer. I was working with them on certain of the revolver updates and amendments and securitizations and all of those things. And so I knew Bill really well. I remember when he became CFO, I was really, really excited because I knew that he'd do a great job. He ended up doing a fantastic job and certainly helping my career along the way by giving me opportunities, starting with the IR role, which, he and I were in the trenches hand in hand through the difficult time.
Hi, it's Jack. I hope you're enjoying our talk with CFO Ryan Gwillim of Brunswick. Wanted to mention, every one of our interviews, we open up with that question: what 3 experiences do you feel help prepare you for a CFO role? Here's a plug for LinkedIn. And no, LinkedIn is not paying for this announcement. But if you're a finance executive, whether you're a CFO, whether you're a controller, whether you are a financial analyst, you should have 3 knockout items on your LinkedIn bio. Think of your LinkedIn bio as your headquarters. You really should. It's a important communication tool. And that's what a podcast is as well, obviously. Finance leaders are coming on because they want to explain themselves. They want to connect with others more effectively. And your LinkedIn page, your personal page, is your headquarters, your individual headquarters. Put some content on that page that really captures people's attention. You're in a really exciting realm, the finance realm. Interesting work, interesting projects. Think about how to package that and write your narrative, and that belongs on that page, that LinkedIn individual bio page. All right, again, LinkedIn has not paid for this announcement, but it troubles me that people are missing out. Executives are missing out by having a really lame LinkedIn bio page. Thanks for listening, as always. Now back to our discussion. We're going to jump to our mentoring round, where I ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We'd like to know, finally, when you did step into the CFO role, finally, you got the top job, that first 30 days, that first 90 days, if you could go back in time, and again, it was only, I guess it was 2020, roughly, you can correct me.
Yep, correct.
If you could go back to 2020 and just give yourself a piece of advice, though. Here's interesting enough, 2020, we know the pandemic's arriving too, or maybe it had already arrived. What piece of advice would you give yourself that first 30 days?
Yeah, I would say focus on relationships. And it was a good piece of advice that I got from Dave, the CEO, who he and I have an excellent relationship. As an aside, and I think most CFOs would say this, the success that one would have in a CFO role is highly dependent on having a CEO that you can trust, respect, and have a relationship with. And I have all of that with Dave, and certainly that's a very valuable thing to have, certainly in my role. But he was very forth looking. He said, "Hey, I know most of the people that are business leaders, et cetera, because I did. I had been working with them for a number of years, but you really need to cultivate relationships, generate that trust, not only on the finance folks, the folks that were on my team, but also the other executives that I was now joining their kind of management team as the CFO. Focus on those relationships, and I did, and I think it's panned quite well, and it certainly has enabled me to be close with a lot of people that now I'm giving advice and sometimes asking hard questions, but having that relationship underlies that they know I'm coming from a point of trust and trying to move forward our operations and our financial success. It's not a I'm trying to get you, or I'm not trying to put you on the spot or embarrass you in front of your peers. And so building relationships, I think, is really at the core tenet of success in a role like this.
We'd like to see if you would reflect a little bit on the personal side for us. We're looking for a personal habit or part of your daily routine that you have. This might be something your colleagues might not know about. It might be something a family member might point out to us. Is there something that you do that sort of sets you apart, or something you're known for? Anything come to mind?
I'll be honest. I'm probably I have four little girls, and so my family life, I think most people know, is really important to me. I have a wonderful wife who's unbelievably supportive, has been obviously for 20 plus years. But I think that is outside of my work life. I think my family, a bit of unique, right? Having four girls, and I'm one of four boys, and so the difference, Jack, in the house that I grew up in, which was fantastic, but it was completely different than the house that I am now the father of. I think that's pretty unique for me. I do all the usual stress relief stuff. I'm an early riser, and I'm not a late. I'm not one to go to bed late. Certainly on school nights, but I get up early and work out generally most days at 5 and start my day that way. I guess one aside is I really like the New York Times spelling bee game. I don't know if you've ever played it, but they give you 7 letters and you got to you got to put as many words together. And it really just makes my wife laugh because I am probably the worst speller of anyone knows.
Is that Wordle? Isn't that it? Is it called Wordle? I think so.
Wordle's the other one. So Wordle is where you have the 5 letters and you're trying to. Yeah. So I'll do that one as well. Yeah. But spelling bee is a little bit more challenging, but it's great stress relief, right? It's good to engage your mind, but do something that's pretty enjoyable. So I'm very lucky. But my family certainly has been a big focus of mine for all of my career, and certainly make decisions around ensuring that my family life will not suffer for whatever role I want to look at.
Nice. Well, would you have a book recommendation for us? Doesn't have to be a business book. Might just be an interest or something you escape with.
So I am really into these like fiction, nonfiction business books. Like I'm reading The $1 Billion Whale right now about the Malaysian banker that kind of allegedly, I'm going to say allegedly, defrauded the government and went and spent billions of dollars partying. But like I've gotten done with the WeWork book, the Theranos Bad Blood. I read the Sackler. I just read the Sackler. So I'm really stuck on these like.
It is a genre now. These types of business whodunits.
It truly is, and it's one of those. I'll start reading it at night, and I just read it on my phone, and I'll fall asleep, and I'll wake up, and my phone will be like on my under my arm or something. But they're light reads, but they really do give insight into. Obviously, most of them have a business focus. But it's also like how were leaders interacting with other leaders and interacting with the general public. I find them obviously entertaining, but also pretty fascinating from a business standpoint.
Thank you for that. And we are up to our final question. And I asked you a few extras, so forgive me. We're close to the top of the hour, but we will get to it. Over the next 12 months, what are your priorities as CFO of Brunswick Corporation?
So, I mean, first off is to accurately portray the results of our company to the investor world. I mean, that's table stakes, right? Is to provide accurate information on the company's performance. I think there's going to be a significant focus on the employee, and I think we've talked a lot about that. Ensuring that people are put in a place to succeed, all the way down from a junior level up to people that report to me, and I've spent a lot of time with my team understanding their goals. I do think we're probably in for a bit of a economic, hard time. I don't think it's anyone's guess whether we're going to have a recession or some kind of macro event. But I do think it's pretty apparent that there's more volatility in the market today than there was a year ago or 2 or 3 years ago. And so part of my job will be to focus an organization like Brunswick that has been solely focused on growth, really over the last 10 years plus, coming out of the downturn, and reminding people that we continue to do that. We want to continue to focus on growth, but also we're going to need to watch, our spending and cash flows and things that get maybe a little bit more scrutiny in times when times are tough. So I think ensuring that we have the chops, if you would, the muscle within the organization to temper spending, to look at capital projects and understand what needs to be imminent and what can be delayed. I think that's going to be an exciting time for the organization as we continue to grow, but also be smart in light of what we're seeing in the macro economy and ultimately, obviously, the consumer. So that's really going to be, I think, my kind of 3 focuses.
Ryan Gwillim, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks for having me. Have a good rest of your day.
Hello, listeners. Do us a favor. Be certain to subscribe to CFO Thought Leader on Apple Podcasts, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or Google Play. If you like the show, please recommend it to a friend.